On today's edition of The Front Row, we are at the Silent Wings Museum out on Interstate 27 at what was the old Lubbock Airport. And our special guests today are Sharon McCullar. She's the curator here at the museum. And Tanis Blount, we're always happy to have you. Tell us exactly your title.
Okay, I am the Education and Volunteer Coordinator for the Municipal Museums. So,
And that's all of them, right?
yes,
Yeah.
both.
Yeah, exactly. So not just here, you have a disparate job. You could do a lot of things.
Well, I do. I bounce back and forth between the Buddy Holly Center and the Silent Wings Museum, so that gives me a lot of scope to work with.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I love most about coming out here is to see the exhibits, but for those people who may be new to the community or haven't made their way out, what is the museum, Sharon, and what does it mean, Silent Wings?
The Silent Wings Museum is dedicated to preserving the legacy specifically of the American World War II glider pilot. And so our collection centers around the experience of that very uniquely trained pilot during World War II and the huge cargo gliders that they flew into combat. Nine major operations during World War II in the European and the Pacific theaters, and a little one in the Philippines, that used gliders to accomplish those missions, and those gliders were crucial to accomplishing those missions. So the Silent Wings Museum concentrates completely on that story. And we have some really cool ties to Lubbock, Texas, because the majority of the glider pilots received their advanced glider training here at South Plains Army Airfield. And so that's one reason that this museum is in Lubbock, Texas, is because when the glider pilots were looking for a home for their legacy and their fully restored CG-4A glider, the city of Lubbock was able to make that connection with them, and that connection to that visceral part of their training, a crucial part of their training. Yeah. And so when I write the exhibits, it's all focused in on that particular story. It's a big story. It's a rich story, but it is a very focused story.
Right, and it's something people might not think about immediately in the story of World War II, is that there were gliders, powerless gliders, and that they were trained in this area. And what did you call it? The South Plains
South Plains Army Airfield was located right where the Silent Wings Museum is sitting. We're actually in the airport terminal that was built in 1950 after all that training had ended, and South Plains Army Airfield reverted back to the city of Lubbock. But when you look out of our gallery windows, you have to pretend not to see the international airport that's there right now, but you have to think about huge cargo gliders over and over again making those landings and learning how to fly, and those hundreds, and it was about 6,000 glider pilots who cycled through here in about 18 months and learned to fly that big cargo glider. So you have to, in your mind's eye, picture a World War II Army airfield rather than a Preston Smith International Airport.
Right, exactly.
But it's training with a cargo glider that's 84 feet wide and 43 feet long, made to carry men and equipment into those combat zones. So it is not a sailplane. It is a utilitarian vehicle for delivering things exactly where they need to be. And so a little imagination will take you right back to 1942 to 1945.
Well, it's so great to put this in historical context and understand exactly what was going on here. And you're the curator. What is the current exhibit?
The current featured exhibit is called Unfamiliar Territory, where I have taken 4 particular maps in the Silent Wings Museum collection that focus in on particular aspects of those operations. The maps that we've chosen to highlight speak to the planning and the execution of those missions and the role of the glider pilots in those missions. And the 4 maps that are featured in the exhibit really tell us what those glider pilots were going to experience, how they prepared for that experience, and for 2 really special ones, they made notes about what that experience meant to them after the fact. So you can only see those 2 particular maps here at Silent Wings Museum because they're annotated by the glider pilots in their own words for their experience.
Where did these come from? How did you acquire them for the museum?
They're all drawn from the collection of the museum, and all of the materials have been donated by the glider pilots themselves over the past 40 years or so. The museum has been in existence since 1984. It was in another location until it came here in 2002. But all of the materials in the collection are things that the glider pilots themselves felt was important to give to a museum to make sure that story would be told. And everything in the exhibit is drawn from what they told us about their experience and what we know about their experience from official records and reports, married with their personal accounts of what they actually did.
Wow. And that's currently on display here at the museum.
It'll be up through April of 2025.
Okay. All right. So quite an amount of time that you can still come and see this incredible exhibit. And Tanis, tell us a little bit more. You said you were involved with education and
Yes.
other things. Tell us about that and what would you do with an exhibition like this?
So an exhibition like this, particularly, we have several weekend workshops set up throughout the year, going on into April, that allow the community to come out and personally connect with these maps from these operations. It's one thing to take a look at a map and go, oh, okay, that's where that operation happened. It's another to take a look at that area, recognize the amount of space it's in, and say, oh, this is the distance from my house to my grandmother's house in Plainview. Oh, Hell's Highway wasn't that long, but it was absolutely horrible for the guys who had to deal with it. So for the next several months, it's 6 months, I believe, we have weekend activities. The weekend workshop this Saturday, September 14th, from 2 to 4, we'll be talking about Western Europe and comparing that to Texas and the greater Southwest areas. And then November 23rd, we'll be doing something very similar with different maps, January 18th, and then March 15th. So every other month we'll have some kind of activity that allows the public to come in, put their hands on some maps, take a look at it, compare it to their personal experience, and be able to really see those distances. I think sometimes when we look at a map, we rely on our GPS to talk to us and tell us about those distances. It takes us a little bit of time to really put our hands on it and see it and understand. Just because this battle happened here doesn't mean that people weren't living here, grocery shopping here, doing different things. And so when you're able to compare those two and take a look at it and go, oh, there were people living here. These things on this map aren't just icons. They're actually people that we're talking about, businesses and homes and schools and churches. And that's very similar to where our grocery stores are, our homes are.
So for the weekends that you have, how can people participate? They just come?
Starting at 2 o'clock for each of the program dates. We have partnered with the City of Lubbock Geographic Information Systems Department.
Oh my.
And they have created the comparative maps that we'll be using to compare the area in either Texas or the South Plains or the greater Southwest, and the area pertinent to those glider operations. And they're at the same scale, so our participants are going to be asked to kind of make those comparisons between what does it look like in Eindhoven, Nijmegen, Arnhem along Hills Highway, and what does it look like from Ralls to Levelland? Same
Right.
distance.
Right.
Same distance.
Yeah.
And so the Geographic Information Systems Department put together those maps for us, made those comparative maps. And so to kick off each program on those program dates, a representative from the GIS department is going to come and talk about what it means to make maps and what it means to have the profession of making maps, and how those GIS professionals make maps for the city of Lubbock so people understand the infrastructure of their community. And it'll be a really cool discussion. We had the first one on Spirit of 45 Day on August 10th, and Joshua did a really good job of explaining what that means to make maps to make people understand the place that they live in. And so a representative from the GIS department will come and do that program, start off our program with that discussion of what map making means and how that translates into understanding our world. And then we'll get into the comparative maps.
It's just so interesting that you say that, because I remember in some of my travels around Europe, I remember vividly coming to the understanding that traveling, as I did from Paris to Brussels to Rotterdam, was a little bit further than Odessa, Lubbock, Amarillo. And I thought, my goodness, it's not quite Oklahoma City, Dallas, Austin. Right. Not quite that, but somewhere in between. And that really puts things into perspective when you're talking about 3 cultures, 3 architectures, 3 languages,
And we'll be talking about that with some of, I think, this comparative set of maps this time. I think we're comparing Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, and laying it over a map, am I right? And laying it over a map of Western Europe. And the number of languages that are spoken in the same geographic footprint of Texas, the number of languages that are actually spoken in Texas might surprise people.
Right.
We have a lot of material about the comparison of the regions, but Texas pretty much covers all of the Western European geography.
Right.
So we're hoping people will make a real connection between the people who lived in those areas during that conflict and their own familiar territory and their own familiar geography, and maybe it won't seem so foreign to them.
Sharon McCullar, tell us a little bit, if you would, tease us what's coming. I think, how long is this exhibit and what comes next?
This one will, Unfamiliar Territory, will run through the end of April of 2025, and then it'll take all of May to kind of install the next one. But I tend to work on the exhibits 2 and 3 years out. So right now I'm in the throes of finishing up the writing for next year's exhibit, which is centered around toys, but not just toys as toys, but toys as learning tools, and how during World War II we used toys and games to inculcate certain values, inculcate certain mindsets and a war footing. And there were toys and games that kind of embraced that, even pointing themselves at children, but it embraced the idea of this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and here's a game that will help you understand why there are materials shortage. There's a toy that will help you understand why your toys are made of paper and not metal, and that sort of thing. So the toys exhibit, we're calling it In the Game Together. So that toys exhibit will install in time for our next D-Day event. Can't remember which weekend it is, but it's the first weekend in June, closest to June 6th. And so we'll spend next year talking about how we learned from toys and games, how toys and games helped feed the war effort, and how it helped communicate to the American public what they could do to help, even little kids.
I hope you'll ask us to come back and talk about that. Our guests on the front row today, Tanis Blount and Sharon McCullar of the Silent Wings Museum. Thank you both for being on the show today.
Thank you, Clint.